Hello, and welcome to the This Happened Today in History podcast. I am your host, Mr. Miller. This podcast will cover a number of topics that happened on this date in history. Please visit the podcast webpage at thishappenedtoday.buzzsprout.com. There you can download the notes page, which will help you organize the information as well as develop your own ideas on how these events change the world around us. If you're interested in hearing more, please consider subscribing so you will not miss out on what happens tomorrow in history. Today is July 14th. One of the world's most powerful telescopes opened its shutters for the first time in 2007 to begin exploring faint light from distant parts of the universe. The Gran Telescopio Canary, a $130 million telescope featuring a 34-foot reflecting mirror, sits atop an extinct volcano. Its location above cloud cover takes advantage of the pristine skies in the Atlantic Ocean. Planning for the telescope began in 1987 and has involved more than 1,000 people from 100 companies. It was inaugurated Friday by King Juan Carlos. The observatory is located 2,400 meters above sea level, where prevailing winds keep the atmosphere stable and transparent, the Canary Island Astrophysics Institute said. The institute, which runs the telescope, said it will capture the birth of stars, study characteristics of black holes, and decipher some of the chemical components of the Big Bang. The telescope is composed of 36 separate mirrors that began slowly focusing in July 2007 to eventually act as a single large reflecting surface that directs light onto a central camera point. Among those who have done research at La Palma is Brian May, lead guitarist of rock group Queen, who studied there for part of his doctorate in astrophysics at the institute. May, who published Bang, The Complete History of the Universe with astronomers Patrick Moore and Chris Lindlot, composed a musical score to the telescope's inauguration. Large reflecting telescopes began making major contributions to astronomical research when Edwin Hubble perfected the technique of capturing photographic exposures of space with a then massive 200-inch mirror at Mount Palomar Observatory in North San Diego County, California in January of 1949. And then in 2008, Belgian-Brazilian brewer InBev was allowed to swallow Anheuser-Busch in a $52 billion takeover, creating the world's biggest brewer, the company said July 14th. After having resisted offers from InBev for a month, the Anheuser-Busch board finally agreed on July 13th to accept a sweetened bid that had been raised to $70 a share in cash from $65. While capping Anheuser's roughly 150 years of independence as a premier American brewer, the deal creates not only the world's largest beer company, but one of the top 5 consumer goods groups in the world. The new company would have net sales of about $36 billion a year, offering consumers about 300 brands, including Anheuser, Budweiser, and Bud Light, and InBev, Stella Artois, and Beck's. InBev chief executive Carlos Brito, a tough 48-year-old Brazilian known for cutting costs, is to lead the new company, which will be called Anheuser-Busch InBev. By merging, the company said they expect to save 1.5 billion euros annually from 2011 through synergies that the tie-up will begin adding to earnings from 2010. This combination will create a stronger, more competitive global company with an unrivaled worldwide brand portfolio and distribution network with a great potential for growth all over the world, Brito said. With the takeover, InBev, which already claims the title of the world's biggest beer maker, would create close to a $100 billion business in the most ambitious act of corporate consolidation since last year's credit crunch shook the markets. The bid for Anheuser-Busch had been stirred fierce opposition in the 150-year-old company's home state of Missouri, where Governor Matt Blunt has called the prospect of a foreign takeover deeply troubling, but many U.S. shareholders in Anheuser, including billionaire investor Warren Buffett, favored the deal. Brito has sought to win over the opponents to the merger by promising to make St. Louis the sprawling company's North American headquarters, as well as by vowing to not close any of the U.S. breweries and lifting the international profile of Budweiser. With Budweiser as our global flagship brand, that'll give us the great platform to develop that brand along with Beck's and Stella Artois, Brito said. The global beer industry has been growing thirst for mergers in recent years as brewers struggle to cope with falling consumption in traditionally big markets in developed countries and soaring prices of raw materials. After successive waves of mergers in recent years, Britain-based SAB Miller and Dutch group Heineken have emerged as the leading international brewers along with InBev and Anheuser-Busch. InBev was created by the 2004 combination of a Belgian group Interbrew and Brazilian brewer Ambev, and since then has focused mostly on emerging markets with a growing taste for beer. And finally, in 1881, Sheriff Pat Garrett shot Henry McCarty, popularly known as Billy the Kid, to death at the Maxwell Ranch in New Mexico. Garrett, who had been tracking the kid for 3 months after the gunslinger had escaped from prison only days before his scheduled execution, got a tip that Billy was holed up with friends. While Billy was gone, Garrett waited in the dark in his bedroom. When Billy entered, Garrett shot him to death. Back on April 1st of 1878, Billy the Kid ambushed Sheriff William Brady and one deputy in Lincoln, New Mexico, after ranch owner John Tunstall had been murdered. Billy had worked at Tunstall's ranch and was outraged at his employer's slaying, vowing to hunt down every man responsible. Sheriff Brady and his men, who had been affiliated with rival ranchers, were involved in the gang that killed Tunstall on February 18th. Billy's retaliatory attack left Brady and Deputy George Hinman dead. Although only 18 years old at the time, Billy had now committed as many as 17 murders. Following his indictment for the murder of Sheriff Brady, Billy the Kid was the most wanted man in the West. Evading posses sent to capture him, he eventually struck a deal with a new governor of New Mexico. In return for his testimony against the perpetrators of the ongoing ranch wars in the state, Billy would be set free. Although he kept his word about the testimony, he began to distrust the promise that he would be released, so he had escaped. Once a fugitive, Billy killed a few more men, including the gunslinger Joe Grant, who had challenged him to a showdown. Legend has it that Billy managed to get a hold of Grant's gun prior to the fight and make sure it had an empty chamber was up first in the man's revolver. When it came time to fire, only Billy's gun went off and Grant was left dead. Legendary Sheriff Pat Garrett finally caught Billy the Kid in to stand trial. The judge sentenced Billy the Kid to hang until you are dead, 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 Billy reportedly responded. And you can go to hell, hell, hell. 2 weeks before his scheduled execution, Billy escaped, killing 2 guards in the process. Garrett mounted yet another posse to bring in the kid. After tracing him to the Maxwell Ranch, Garrett shot him to death. No legal charges were brought against him since the killing was ruled a justifiable homicide. You have been listening to the This Happened Today in History podcast. I thank you for listening, and I hope that you have enjoyed learning about historical events from the past. Thank you to the following websites for their information regarding today's topics: ThePeopleHistory.com, Great Canary Telescope at phys.org, Anheuser Busch Taken Over at IndustryWeek.com, and Billy the Kid Shot at History.com. The music used as the background track for this podcast is Americana, created by Kevin MacLeod on Incompetech.com. If you enjoyed this information and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing, as this will keep the historical events in your feed in the morning for each day. I hope you have a great day.